I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and we took a look at the T-Mobile myTouch Q in the full review a couple of days ago. Now it's time for its little brother, the T-Mobile myTouch, available now for the same price and packing identical specs with the exception of one thing. It's a little bit thinner and a little bit lighter due to the fact that it doesn't have a physical QWERTY keyboard. Let's take a look in the full video review of the T-Mobile myTouch, which starts right now. So we covered the myTouch Q earlier in the week. This is the T-Mobile myTouch. It's another one of the myTouch devices, one of two that are available now at T-Mobile for $49.99 after a $50 mail-in rebate. You'll notice it looks really similar to the myTouch Q as well because it looks a lot like that one with the exception of the lack of physical QWERTY keyboard. Otherwise, the ports are in very similar places. That said, the micro USB charging port's at the bottom on this device instead of the left side on the myTouch Q, but it sheds some of the weight because it is a touch-only device. It does not have a physical QWERTY keyboard. Before we get too far into the review, though, some love to Best Buy Mobile for hooking us up with phones like the myTouch for use in our One Paw Bandit giveaway game. When you go into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working. They'll help you set up your email, your web, your contacts, your settings, and more. So when you walk out the door, you're good to go at Best Buy Mobile. So you've got this device, spec-wise identical to the myTouch Q for the most part, save for the dimensions and the weight. You've got a 1.4 gigahertz single-core Snapdragon S2 processor here, a 4-inch WVGA display. You've got a 1,500 milliamp hour battery in the back. Got 3.5mm headphone jack, all the goodies on the sides, and then you've got Android 2.3.6 with a custom user interface, and of course the myTouch stuff, which includes the Genius button, which we'll talk more about most likely in part 2. So you can see, out of the gate, not a bad little spec device. It doesn't have a dual-core processor, and like I said in the myTouch Q review, I think people are going to be hard-pressed to buy this when you can get great devices on other carriers for the same price, with dual-core processors, with great specs, and more. So think about, for example, the One X, or perhaps let's say the One X, the Lumia 900 on AT&T. Lumia 900 is $50. The One X has recently been reduced to $99. But you go to AT&T, and yeah, you're paying a little bit more in the long term, but you're getting a device with a dual-core processor, an 8-megapixel camera, a bigger display that's HD, and more. So you've got to decide, do you want to take the cost savings of T-Mobile, or hey, even if you want to stay with T-Mobile, the One S is a relatively inexpensive device on T-Mobile. So out of the gate, you're going to see the standard T-Mobile applications here. You've got 411 and more, Access T-Mobile. You've got Game Base, Mobile Life Organizer, Monopoly Classic, More For Me, Music Hub. You got Setup, T-Mobile Mall, T-Mobile Name ID, T-Mobile TV, Visual Voicemail, Words with Friends for free, Wild Tangent, and more. So a lot of different T-Mobile stuff pre-installed, and unfortunately, you can't get rid of that stuff. But you do have 5 home screens here, a lot of T-Mobile widgets pre-installed. And you'll notice a lot of customizations as a result of this user interface. For example, right here, you'll notice I've got some shortcuts in the notifications bar, and then over here, you'll notice the widgets, and then you've got some static shortcuts down here. You've got a home button, which accesses, or a menu button, I should say, and then you've got a phone button down here at the bottom. And then, of course, you can customize these as you see fit. So if you want to throw tips or telenav perhaps down in here, you can. You can move these around, and you've got 5 home screens to do with whatever you want to do with your device. So it's a 4G device, HSPA+, so you do get T-Mobile's 4G capabilities out of the gate. Let's take a look at messages, though, on this device. I'm going to pull it out here while I compose a new one because it automatically brings up numbers, and a bunch of people text messaged me when I had this number available on the unboxing video. So that is why I pulled it away from the screen. 3.5mm headphone jack, power button over here. You've got a camera button on the right side, volume rocker on the left side, and then, of course, a pretty svelte, pretty thin device, and overall it's a good-looking device. But again, I keep going back to, for what you get for $50, you might want to take a look at something else. That said, it's a review. Let's take a look. Android keyboard and swipe pre-installed on both of these, or both keyboards pre-installed on this device, I should say. And with a 4-inch display, most people aren't going to have an issue, particularly if you're migrating from another carrier and you're coming up from something like the iPhone or maybe the older myTouch devices with a 3.7-inch display. You should be relatively pleased with this, as you can see here. Pinch to zoom, portrait to landscape transitions, very responsive, and we'll say the quick brown fox is happy that it is Friday. Friday, gotta get down on Friday. And you got a stock gingerbread keyboard here, and of course you can do stuff and download keyboards from it. You can do stuff. That's really a smart phrase there, Aaron. You can go into Google Play and download additional keyboards. Swift Key, you've got Ice Cream Sandwich keyboard, the Jelly Bean keyboard, and more, all available in there. But overall, pretty easy to type on. That said, if you're coming from something maybe like the Evo 4G or maybe an older device with a 4.5-inch display, you may have some issues coming down to this device. So take a look at it in store, type on it, see if it's a device you can get used to. That said, you'll also notice that thanks to the myTouch UI, you can see it goes from portrait to landscape mode even on the menu. So If that's something you don't like, you can always turn that off in the settings. But like I said, out of the gate, some T-Mobile stuff. You'll also see some stuff that I downloaded in the time that I've been working with the device. And let's take a brief look at the browser. We'll load up PhoneDog and take a look at the actual website. So overall, looks a lot like stock Android here. No real customizations to the actual browser page. You got PhoneDog loading up right now, and you can see pinch to zoom, relatively responsive, not as fast by any means as a dual-core device or a quad-core device, but still relatively fast to get the most basic tasks done. Again, portrait to landscape, relatively fast, although you don't get that transition effect, at least on the menu itself. Take a look, you're getting the transition effect in the browser, but you're not getting the transition effect over here with the actual bar at the top. So you see it shifts pretty quickly. Actually, there it goes, perfect. You are getting the full thing now. Did you notice that earlier that wasn't doing the whole thing? Now it's doing the full thing, and it's got this cute little transition effect where it's like, whoa, went too far, oh snap. And that's a pretty cutesy little thing that it does there. So pinch to zoom, relatively responsive, and to open new tabs, all you do is go to Windows and open up a new window. Though that said, it's relatively easy to do, but you don't get the actual picture look where you can see where you left off. So that's something to keep in mind there as well. Otherwise, let's take a look at some of the personal information management stuff, calendar, phone, etc. And forgive me here while I pull the phone out again. I wanted to show you the dial pad, but I wanted to make sure nobody's numbers came up. Got a standard dial pad here with a voicemail shortcut, call log, contacts, favorites, and more all up there in the top part of the corner. And then calendar, as you can see here, some customizations as a result of the user interface. You got today, day, week, month, and then agenda, new, where I can add a new appointment right here. And it goes into the pretty standard Google look and feel right there. Though that said, again, standard look and feel here. There's some minor customizations down there at the bottom. Another thing I want to point out, and we'll actually do this in part one, is the Genius button. Skip. And we'll wait here while it adds my names for my library. Or my library, as they say in the South. Text message, T-Mobile. Hi, how are you? Send text to Bill Richardson. What's new? Oh, Bill Stevenson, whatever, same thing. Bill Stevenson, but with the last name of Richardson. What's new? So you can see you can use Genius to look up things, find stuff in maps. You can do text messages, calls, and more. So it's a nice little feature to have on there, and given the fact this device is at a $50 price point, it's a really nice feature considering the price of the device. That said, you're paying $100 out of the box before the rebate, so keep that in mind. You've got some nifty little wallpapers on this device as well. We'll take a look at some of these wallpapers that come pre-installed. Some nice little different nature wallpapers, and then of course you've got these over here. Go to that one, which is what I had on the myTouch Q. And then you've got some standard widgets here as well, some standard Google stuff, but you do have this one as well, which I like a lot. The weather widget's pretty useful. And then out of the gate, you got analog clock, calendar, Facebook favorites, Google+, Google search, latitude, lookout security, and tips, traffic, Twitter, weather, and YouTube, and more. So a lot of different application-based widgets, a lot of different stock Google widgets, and you'll notice that even though, for example, my calendar is here, when I add the widget, let's go over here and add it. Should have room on the home screen for the calendar widget. You can see even though the icon is different, it's the stock Android calendar widget.